Hello there, welcome back to LeEdFollow and Happy New Year, Happy 2024. I hope you all had a great holiday season. We're kicking off this year with a little video here about alloy wheels, specifically alloy wheels for the GT86, GR86, FRS and the BRZ, which I'm going to collectively refer to now as the Toybarus. Now, if you have a look on internet forums, internet videos in relation to alloy wheels on these cars, there are two rumours that I've seen coming up now and again in various places, and those are that you will destroy the handling on one of these cars if you go for a staggered wheel setup or if you go for 19-inch wheels. So those are the rumours that we're going to try to debunk today, because I've always ran a square wheel setup on my Cosworth GT86. However, I have now got a new set of staggered wheels, and they're 19. So we're going up from 18s to 19s, from a square set to a staggered set. So let's see what happens. Okay, so for everybody at home that doesn't know the difference between a square and a staggered set of wheels, let me explain. So the Toybarus, because of their Subaru all-wheel drive underpinnings, they come with a square setup. So what that means is that every wheel and tyre is exactly the same on all four corners. A couple of benefits of that. Number one, price. When you come to buy tyres, you're buying them in sets of 4, generally cheaper. The other thing is rotating and maintaining your tyres. Now, if you check your handbook, you're supposed to annually rotate them as so, and that way they all wear evenly and you get your money's worth out of the tyres. Now, if you go for a more powerful car, like say a Toyota Supra, you may need a lot more grip in order to get that extra power down onto the road. But you don't want to put 4 wider tyres on the car, because the wider you go on the front, the heavier it makes the steering. So the answer is just put wider tyres on the rear. And that, my friends, is a staggered setup. Now, going back to the myths, there are lots of people who say that the Toybarus came at the factory with a square setup and that is only what you should run. So out of the factory, all the Toybarus came with either 16, 17 or 18-inch wheels, depending on age and specification. But they all tend to be around 7-inch wide, and they have tyres between 205 and 225 in width. Now, because this is the Cosworth and it's got gigantic front brakes, I had to go up to 18-inch wheels, otherwise the brakes just wouldn't fit on the 17s. And these are actually 8.5-inch wide wheels running 235 profile tyres. So there's a lot more tyre to get all of that extra power down onto the ground. So let's take a look at these front wheels. Now, of course, these are 18 by 8.5-inch wide, and they're running 235 profile tyres, and if you look at it down the side, that's a pretty flush, snug fit. Quite happy with that. I personally wouldn't want to go any wider on the front for 2 reasons. Number one, you might start to get rubbing on either the arch or the arch liner, and number 2 is the wider you go, the heavier you make the steering feel. But now let's have a look at the rears. Now again, remember, this is a square setup, so we've got the same wheels and tyres front and back. If I zoom in here, you'll notice that the wheel actually sits quite a bit further far into the arch compared to the front. And that's because the arches do stick out slightly wider at the rear of the car. That's just normal. Here's another angle. So center of the screen, you can see the front, how flush fit they are. And as I go in like this, you can start to appreciate how much extra arch space there is there. So like I said, these are 8.5-inch wide. We could probably get a much wider rim and tyre under there. Toyota always planned on people buying these cars to tune them. So I think that's why they gave us such big rear arches compared to the front, so that you did have the option to go staggered if you wanted to. Now, I think tuning a car is very much like having a balanced diet. The most important thing is everything in moderation. You know, in the same way that if you spent a month eating cheeseburgers, you might find that you got a bit fat. Well, if you put a terrible set of wheels and tyres on a car, that's going to upset the handling in the same way. So you've got to just be sensible with the modifications you make to your car. Now, I like these wheels so much, and I like the way that the car steers so much that on my new set of wheels, I've gone for exactly the same ones again. These are 57 Extremes by Rays, and these front ones in this now staggered setup are again 8.5 inch wide, running 235 profile tyres. We've just gone up to 19, so it shouldn't make the steering of the car feel any different than what's already on there. But as this is now a staggered setup, the rears down at the bottom here, they are 9.5 inch wide rims running 265s. So we're going to have a lot more grip at the back, but the front should steer exactly how it was before.
So first up, we've got one of the 18 by 8.5 inch rims, which has got a 235 tyre on it. And this weighs in at dead on 20 kilograms. So let's now get one of the 19 by 8.5 inch wide front wheels from the staggered set, which is also running a 235 tyre, and that is weighing 20.5, let's say. So we've added half a kilogram to the front wheels. That's not too bad. So now let's look at the rears. Of course, these are 19 by 9.5 and they're running a 265 profile tyre. So I expect some kind of weight gain here. As we can see, these are now 23 kilos. So unfortunately, I've added 3 kilos to each of the back wheels. That will have a noticeable effect on performance, most likely, but it's not terrible. As I'm going to be moving over to using this flat 6 BRZ as my main track car, this supercharged GT86 can be a bit of a garage queen, a bit of a show car from now on. So it's not a problem.
Well, they look pretty awesome. I mean, you can see the 18s in the background there. These have only gone up 1 inch. They don't look a huge amount different, but when you now look at the profile, they actually poke out slightly. I really don't know how that's going to go with the rubbing. I might get rubbing on that, but the previous owner, he said he didn't get any rubbing, but he was running 255 profile tyres. I've now gone up to 265. Was that a bad choice? We will find out. So we're out on the road, and yeah, it's a bit firmer. It is noticeably a bit firmer. It's not as bad as I was expecting it to be, though. I mean, going from 18s to 19s, you've lost essentially an inch of tyre in exchange for an inch of wheel. So yes, I can feel it is noticeably firmer. However, I expected it to be a lot firmer, in all honesty, and I'm pleasantly surprised. I could live with this. This is not ruining the car. It drives very similarly to the 80s that I had on before, in all honesty. So the steering. Now, the Toybarus are famous for having some of the best steering and feedback in the business. Now, luckily, it hasn't changed much at all. I mean, yes, I mentioned it was a bit firmer, but it is a little bit more communicative now. I can feel more of the bumps in the road, what the front wheels are doing. Very happy with that, actually. So what about the back end? Well, of course, I've gone up to much wider tyres on the back end, and this car feels properly stuck to the road now. The back end is very much behaving itself in a way that I've never experienced on this car before. It feels like there's no movement back there whatsoever. And I'm not quite sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It could be that now I can go flying this thing through a corner and it's got an amazing amount of grip that I can very much improve my lap times, or it could be that because it's so much stiffer and grippier now, then it might snap a bit more violently, a bit more uncontrollably. We will not know until we take this thing out on the track with these new wheels and tyres, unfortunately. So that brings me on to the tyres. Well, of course, on the 18s, I was running Goodyear Eagle F1 asymmetric 5s, and now on these new staggered 19s, I'm running Michelin Pilot Sport 4Ss. Now, it wasn't that I wanted to get away from the Goodyears, it was just that when I was looking at what the best deal was on tyres at the time, the Pilot Sport 4Ss were the better deal compared to the Goodyear asymmetrics or the Super Sports. So, unfortunately, because I've changed tyres and wheels, it's hard to know whether the feelings, the changes in the way the car's driving are down to just the change in wheel size and the staggered setup, or whether it is the tyre difference, because these are brand new tyres. They're going to need a bit of a bedding in period. They are wider tyres. Oh, it's very, very hard to say what the biggest changes has been. So I guess we're going to just really have to take it on a track day now, and we're going to have to put it through its paces and see how these wheels and tyres perform.
So I've always liked the way these carbon grey rays look on the 86. However, being really bright and orange, my heart tells me this car looks better on bright silver rims. These new 19s don't look that dissimilar in size to the 18s they replaced, but I just really love the way that this new staggered set of wheels really helps to fill those rear arches and gives the car really awesome looking stance.
So going back to the original questions of this video, should you avoid putting staggered wheels on a Toybaru? Well, hand on heart, no. I don't think you should avoid it at all. It's entirely up to you. Put a square setup, put a staggered setup on your car. One thing I would say though is, with the standard power levels of these cars and the fact that they do come with a square setup from the factory, unless you're going for big power, you may as well just stay with a square setup, because you've got those advantages of that you can buy tyres in 4s, and that generally saves you money. And the problem is, if you put too wide a tyre on a standard powered car, you're basically making the car's life a lot harder. It's going to have to spin up much wider, heavier wheels and tyres, so it's actually going to be a drain on the performance. However, if you're like me, if you supercharge or you turbocharge a car, or you've got a much more powerful engine now in your car, then you probably want to put wider tyres on the back so you contain all of that extra power, get it transmitted down to the road. So going to that second question, should you avoid putting 19s onto a Toybaru? Are 19s too big? Well, in all honesty, no, I don't think they are too big. The way this car drives now on these 19s is perfectly fine. If it came at the factory like this, I'd be very happy. So it can't all be plus points. There must be some negatives there, otherwise everybody would run staggered 19s. Well, yes, there are some negatives. Number one, as I mentioned earlier in the video, the rear wheels are now a bit heavier than what they were before, and that means I've got more unsprung mass, which 1 kilogram of unsprung mass is supposed to be something like 10 kilograms in the boot or something like that. So I've basically theoretically added about 60 kilos to the car somewhere. I mean, you can kind of counteract that by removing all of the spare wheel from the boot and all this kind of stuff. It might be a problem if you were really looking for lap times and stuff on track days, but as I'm kind of retiring this car slowly when I move over to the flat 6 BRZ, it's not really a big problem for me. Number two, the speedo is slightly out now, so when I'm doing 27 miles per hour on the speedo, I'm actually doing 30. So I've got to keep in my mind that I've got to kind of aim for about 25 through a 30 speed cap to make sure that I'm definitely under the limit. And then also, because we're going up to 19s and staggered, the tyres are now significantly more expensive than what the standard tyres would have been on one of these cars. So that's really the negatives, but they're not terrible negatives. The most important thing is this handles really, really well still, and I'm really enjoying the way the car drives. Steering feels great, and I've got so much extra grip now, which should really make a difference with how quickly I can take corners out on tracks. And I think that's probably a good place to end this video, and I would say we can safely debunk that theory that you shouldn't fit staggered or 19-inch wheels to your Toybaru. Toybaru's the same size as the Supra pretty much, that runs staggered 19s, pretty much says it all really. But just make sure that if you are going to go for 19s or stag wheels or staggered 19s, do your research, get the right set of rims with the correct offset and the correct tyres so that you don't ruin the ride, you don't rub your arches, and you retain the fantastic handling and steering that these cars are famous for. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope it's useful, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.